Dr. Bill Andrews, welcome to the show. I feel like I've known you for a very, very long time. I know that we were trying to pin down some of those dates before, and we were both wrong, but that's okay. Um, and now, from everything that people have heard from the intro, I know everybody's going to be so excited to meet you and hear from you. And before we get started, we're going to hear a lot about your accomplishments, your accolades in the field, but I want to start out this episode with congratulating you on your very latest award, the Bacon Award, given by the Coalition of Radical Life Extension for extraordinary contributions to the advancement of radical life extension. So, congratulations, my friend. That is
Well,
quite
thank
an
you.
honor.
I wish the name was different since I'm a vegan. But
Well, it came from two scientists in the past whose last name was
for
Bacon. So,
Francis Bacon and Roger Bacon, who
right.
pioneered this modern science, the techniques of modern science.
Yeah. So it's not named from,
No, it's not pig
yeah.
meat.
Yeah. But no, that is an awesome achievement. And you have been at this for a long time.
Yeah,
Um,
whole life.
what, how did you get started in this whole thing? I think I've heard you say that you've been interested in aging since 10.
Yeah, I mean, that's a long answer. I can you can cut me off anytime you want, but I tell
Okay.
you, it was coming home from school when I was like 10 years old with a note pinned to my shirt. My parents read the note and it said, "Your son is very interested in science and medicine and astronomy. You should nurture that." Well, first thing my parents did was bought me a really nice telescope. And I was out on the front lawn one night when I was 10 years old, looking at Saturn and Jupiter and things
Oh,
like
how
that.
fun.
And my father just walks out and says to the front line and says to me, "Bill, when you grow up, you should become a doctor and find a cure for aging." And he also said, "I don't know why nobody's done that yet." He actually thought it should be something simple. He actually thought of aging as a disease. He thought it was something to be cured. Uh,
Wow.
so I've thought that way ever since, but it's only in the last like 10 years I've been hearing people tell me it's not a disease. You can't cure it. It doesn't make sense. But
Yeah.
I'm still a believer. When we do cure it, and everybody else will say it is a disease. But but I was just very interested in studying aging. So I got very excited about it because one, I love living,
Yeah.
and I don't want to age, even though I was only 10 years old at the time. I'd seen my grandparents age. I remember my grandfather sitting in his house one time talking to my father, and he says, "I'm not going to be around much longer." And my father goes, "No, don't say that. Don't say that." And sure enough, he was gone within a year. And it was like, that's not right. That's not just not right. And so I kind of like, I started studying, well, let's say mostly when I got into high school. I started anti-aging clubs, okay, things like that. And we'd sit around, me and my friends, and we would just talk about the theories on why we age. And I kept thinking, none of them make sense. I always say that all the twos and twos have to add up.
Right.
Everybody was saying that aging is caused by an accumulation of environmental damage, things like that. And if that was true, we'd have a much bigger bell curve, a broader bell curve in terms of the age we are when we die.
Right.
And that's just not the case. The bell curve is very narrow.
Yeah.
And so it kind of tells me that aging is programmed. And so that's what the focus of all my talks used to be with these clubs. I had one in college too, just a group of friends. One of my friends actually got the Nobel Prize in medicine in 2010, I think it was, or 2000, somewhere around there, a guy named Bruce Beutler. But he and I were so fascinated with the subject of aging. We actually did research as undergraduates at UC San Diego in a lab run by Dr. Dan Lindsley, where we actually were working on fruit fly aging. We were novices relative to people like Dr. Mike Rose, who just blew us away when I learned about him and all his work he'd done on fruit flies and aging. But still, it was like we were beginners, and we were just at the time. So that was early to mid 1970s, and we're just getting into it, and I had a lot to learn yet. But one thing that really bothered me was this narrow bell curve. Why do we have a narrow bell curve on the age of when people die? And why do dogs and cats also have a narrow bell curve? And the bell curve is very different, in a very different position than ours.
Yeah.
And why do all these age-related diseases seem to correspond exactly with the same thing with aging? It always coming down to me, there's something programmed inside of ourselves that causes us to age. And it was a long time after that I started figuring out why that is, but I'll come back to that later. But
yeah,
I kept thinking, okay, what kind of biological mechanism could exist in a cell that would cause us to age? And it just didn't seem possible that evolution could evolve some type of clock that's ticking, or something, control mechanism stuff. But one day I was playing pool in Palm Springs, and I knocked a ball into the hole, and I took my cue stick, and up on the wall there was this scorekeeper. I moved a wooden chip from one side to the other. I thought, hey, I just marked a score there. I wonder if there's some kind of mechanism that could exist there inside of ourselves, like keeping score of when playing pool. But then I started realizing, you don't need to know, cell doesn't need to know how old it is. It needs to know how much longer it will live.
Yeah,
okay?
I like that.
Two different subjects. And so I then started thinking, okay, it's got to be something more like ride tickets at an amusement park. And your mother gives you a bunch of tickets, you go into the amusement park and you say, well, I get to ride 10 rides. Well, you ride 2 of them, then you look at your ticket, well, I can only have 8 more rides. And on until you get to no tickets and the rides are over. And so I thought, God, is there some kind of mechanism like that evolution could have created in humans to cause us to age, and also to put a limit on our lifespan? Well, so skip a few years, nothing ever made sense to me. I couldn't figure it out. But then one day in the early 1990s, I attended an anti-aging conference in Lake Tahoe, and heard a guy named Calvin Harley. Before I say this, it was really funny because I mentioned Mike Rose before and his work with fruit flies, and he and I actually started a company that at that conference to focus on doing his same techniques on fruit flies and do it in mice. We called it MRX for Methuselah Research.
Okay.
And but the very next day, I heard a guy named Dr. Calvin Harley talk about telomere shortening, and I thought, oh my God, those are the ride tickets. And so I instantly went up to the podium and told Calvin, I asked him first, has anybody figured out how to add more tickets back?
Yeah.
To make it younger. And he said, oh, we've been working for years on that. We've got collaborators all over the world working with us. Nobody's been able to figure it out. And I just said, let me come and work with you. I'll figure it out in 3 months. I
love that.
I'm notorious for doing that. I played key roles in the discovery of human growth hormone and tissue plasminogen activator and beta seron and lots of biotech breakthroughs. And in all cases, I did these things after hundreds of other scientists couldn't do it, failed. And I just came in and did it single-handedly. So I kind of had a background, and it was a reputation in the biotech field as being the go-to person if something nobody else could get something done.
Right.
So Calvin just offered me the job on the spot. And the worst part was I had to go now to Mike Rose and tell him that I'm not going to be part of the new company we just started. And but the thing that I didn't mention is that my father, who had inspired me to get into the aging to begin with at 10 years old, he was at that conference too, because he was a TV movie producer.
Okay.
And he wanted to make a documentary on the research that's going on to cure aging. And so I went to my father first and I said, oh my God, I'm so worried. I've just agreed to start this company with Mike Rose and some other scientists. And now I got to go tell him I don't want to do it. And I just said to my father, would you like to be president of this new company that Mike Rose is doing? And he said, sure. So I went to Mike Rose and the other scientist that was involved. His name was Parviz Sabur. And I was kind of disappointed because when I suggested to them that I'm going to go and my father can be the president, they went, yay. Because my father was already a successful businessman. He had started companies, things like that. And they were really thrilled that my father was going to be the president of the company. And my feelings were hurt a little bit. I went to Geron Corporation to work with Calvin Harley and ended up discovering telomerase in 3 months and 17 days. So I was a
Oh
little
my
bit
gosh.
late. So I discovered, because that was how to lengthen the telomeres.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. All right. Well,
Telomerase had already been discovered in a pond scum organism called tetrahymena, but what I discovered was the similar enzyme in humans, and
okay.
that's what we needed because the one in tetrahymena did not actually control aging, whereas the one in humans does.
Right.
It was very different from the one in
Okay.
but
Okay. So, well, before we progress any further, let's take one step to the side. And for our listeners' benefit, because there's so much crosstalk, like kind of like what you said in the beginning, all this crosstalk of aging. What is aging? And nothing's wrong with aging. It's a natural process. And other people like, oh no, it is a disease. So for the sake of our podcast, and really for the sake of all the podcasts I do, you guys, because you guys know me, we are talking biological, metabolical aging, which many of us do believe is a disease.
Yeah. Well, before I answer that, I have to say that my background and credentials are different than other people in the field. And so my answers to those questions are going to be very different from what you've heard before.
Okay.
But my credentials are about as good as can be because, my PhD is essentially in what I call the what and the how and why of evolution, not the what and when, which is what most people study, but the how and why. And that's called population genetics. But my PhD was also in molecular genetics, which is how to control our own evolution. And through all that, I got a very strong background in statistical theory. And that's why when I can look at bell curves and stuff like that, I can say, this is not something that's caused by random damage or random events. It's caused by something that's programmed. Okay, so in answer to my questions, I would say starting off with what is aging, I would say aging is really just a decline in function of body parts, okay, organs and things like that. And after a certain age, our bodies lose the ability to support the maintenance of these body parts, okay? And there's a reason for that, and that's because from an evolutionary perspective, and this is where my population genetics comes in, the way evolution works is not really, when you hear about survival of the fittest, it's not the individual that is important, it's the species. Okay. Survival of the fittest species. And so survival depends on being able to survive a rapidly changing environment, which has happened a lot. And so most of the discussion, we're talking about ancient humans, not present humans. But ancient humans, we had to, and other species too, they had to be able to survive rapidly changing environments. And the way to do that was to have a lot of variability, at least genetic variability within the species. So if you have a lot of variability, you increase the chances that some members of the species will survive the rapidly changing environment. If everybody's identical, they're all going to die or they're all going to live. Right. Okay? You need to have a variety so that some will live and some won't, and et cetera. But it turns out that if you do like pedigree charts of like generation 1, generation 2, parents, offspring, grandchildren, things like that, you find out that the variability within the species actually increases a lot if you eliminate the forebears. Okay, so the generations that have already reproduced, okay, it's if they just keep reproducing over and over again, if the like parents are just rebreeding over and over again and not letting the offspring interbreed, then variability drops a lot within the species. And so the most successful species have all found ways to eliminate the longer living species, the ones that have lived long enough to raise their young.
Right.
So there's no evolutionary advantage to living longer than it takes to raise your young. You're actually in the way afterwards because you end up being competing with the younger generation that can, by interbreeding, will add even more variability to the species. So successful species have been the ones that have evolved a way to limit the lifespan. And ancient humans, we had children when we were 13.
Yeah.
And people could fend for themselves. Ancient humans could fend for themselves by the time they were 7. So there was no evolutionary advantage to living longer than 20, because that's 13 plus 7 is 20. And after that, you've already done your job to contribute to the variability, contributing to this variability within the species. Yeah. Now just get lost. Okay, so we've evolved an aging process for that. And so that's why after you're 20, there's no reason why we would evolve a system to actually protect us to live longer. So that's why we get cancer and heart disease and everything like that later ages, but not very rarely do we get them at younger ages.
Right.
So that's why we age. So successful species are the ones that eliminate the old, and we do that by aging. It puts a limit on our lifespan. And so what else did I say? So yeah, I guess that pretty much adds it up. So I mentioned that what is aging is a decline in maintenance, supporting the maintenance of our body parts, because there's no reason to evolve ways to maintain it after we've raised our young.
Right.
The why we age and stuff like that is the variability within the species, and how we age is definitely programmed.
So do you fight with yourself? Do you have this inner struggle where it's like, okay, well, I know that there's really no point for us to continue on because we've already done our job and we're in the way, but yet I want to fight, or not fight, but I want to cure aging at the same time. So is there that inner conversation going on with you saying, Bill, this isn't right? And you're like, oh no, but it is right. But this is what we need to do.
Wait, humans are the only species that have actually become smart enough to control our own evolution. We control not just our own evolution, but also animals like horses and dogs. Dogs came from wolves. Okay, nature didn't create dogs; humans created dogs. Okay, same with a lot of horse species and things like that. And so I don't have any conflict at all. I think, okay, evolution, you've done your part. Now get lost. And that's the other part of my PhD is molecular genetics. Yeah, because that is how we are going to control our own evolution. Okay, is through engineering our bodies. That's why I'm a very strong member of the transhumanist party, which is all about trying to make us more better and things like that by mechanical means and also by genetic means.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. So we have so much to dig into, and oh my gosh, where do we even start? Let's kind of walk through this a little bit. So from your research, as you are like going through the stages, through the years, looking for that cure of aging, what are some of the things that you see as the main contributors to aging besides evolution, things that we are doing to ourselves?
Well, I always say that there's a lot of things that cause aging. Okay. And they're like multiple sticks of dynamite that are burning inside of our cells. And the big question is, which stick of dynamite has the shortest fuse? And that's the one we need to focus on.
Okay.
Now, in all my studies, I've learned that the stick of dynamite with the shortest fuse is a different stick of dynamite in humans than it is in mice and other rodents. Okay, so even though we all age by several different mechanisms, telomere shortening appears to be the stick of dynamite with the shortest fuse in humans, if you have the perfect genetics and lead the perfect lifestyle. Okay, but then, you know, not everybody dies from old age because of short telomeres, but at least some of the other things are controllable. Like mice, their stick of dynamites with the shortest fuses appear to be both oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction. Now, we also suffer from oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction too.
Yeah.
But if you lead a healthy lifestyle and take the right supplements, you can control that pretty easily. And if you have the really good genetics too, because a lot of people, it's just hopeless because their genetics are bad.
Yeah.
And that's where hopefully gene editing and stuff like that is going to save the world in the future. So yeah, the multiple sticks of dynamite. But I believe that a lot of things cause us to age, but the one that really we humans, and when I say humans, there's other animals that colleagues of mine have figured out also age by telomere shortening as having the shortest, the dynamite with the shortest fuse is telomere shortening is in humans and most other primates, not all of them, like marmosets, they do have it, but lemurs don't. Lemurs age more like mice.
Okay.
Then there's also dogs, cats, horses, sheep, pig, and deer. They also all age by telomere shortening.
Interesting.
And what is really surprising, well, it's not that surprising to me, but to most, is that half the animals I just listed are domesticated animals.
Yeah.
Okay, dogs, cats, and horses. Which is telling me that aging is a relatively recent evolutionary event. Okay, and you know, maybe 100,000 years ago we really didn't age, and there was no need to age because predators and things like that killed us off faster than aging would have ever done. And so it might be that aging in a lot of animals didn't really evolve until the last few thousand years.
Yeah.
I don't really know it, but I wish there's studies I'd like to do. Like, for instance, I'd like to look more closely at what causes aging in wolves. Okay, since dogs came from wolves,
Yeah.
and it would be really incredible if we were to find out that wolves don't age by telomere shortening, but dogs do. It would really be suggesting that aging is a relatively recent event.
Yeah.
I don't know when humans started creating dogs, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're talking all this stuff about telomeres. What is a telomere?
Okay, well, telomeres are things found at the very tips of our chromosomes.
Mm-hmm.
And every time a cell divides, the telomeres get a little bit shorter. And it's not by wear and tear and degradation and unraveling. And there's a lot of theories about, you often hear when people talk about telomere shortening, they talk about the degradation or telomere dysfunction, things like that. But it's actually not the case. There is ways to cause degradation and stuff with telomeres. I call that accelerated aging or accelerated telomere shortening. But the main cause of telomere shortening is actually not shortening at all. It's when a cell divides and the DNA is duplicated. Every time, so when you have a cell and it wants to divide to make two daughter cells, everything inside that parent cell needs to be duplicated. That includes the chromosomes. Mm-hmm. And telomeres. And so when the cell divides and it makes a new copy of the DNA, it lacks the ability to duplicate all the way to the end of the chromosome. So the new DNA is made shorter. It wasn't degraded to become shorter, it was made shorter. So the cell divides, the daughter cells have shorter telomeres than the parent did. And eventually, so every time a cell divides, it gets like 50 to 100 bases shorter. Bases are measurement of DNA length. And so it turns out and Leonard Hayflick discovered this in 1961. Human cells can only divide a certain number of times. At least that's when he published it, was 1961. He probably discovered it before. So telomeres explain why human cells can only divide a certain number of times, because every time the cell divides, it gets a little bit shorter.
Right.
And when you do the math, you find out that, well, when you're first conceived, your telomeres are 15,000 bases in length.
Okay.
When you're born, because there's so much cell division from a single cell embryo to a newborn baby, by the time you're born, your telomeres have shortened down to 10,000 bases. And then things don't stop there, because
Right.
you have a lot of growing to do, a lot of diseases to fight, wounds to heal, things like that, immune functions to fight. Your telomeres are constantly shortening throughout your life. Some tissues like skin and immune system and gut, they are dividing all the time. So it's like it's constant division. They're called continuous replicators.
Okay.
So the telomeres are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And it turns out that when the telomeres get down to 5,000 bases, your cells lose the ability to function, and they enter into a stage called senescence, and then later cells die.
Right.
And so that's, that's something that really, Leonard Hayflick had figured that out, but it wasn't understood why this happens until we discovered telomerase and showed that telomeres, we could overcome what was called the Hayflick limit on the number of times a cell can divide. We totally obliterated the Hayflick limit by lengthening telomeres in human cells with telomerase.
Okay.
So,
That's really interesting. Now, when I first heard you speak, I heard you talk about, you kind of did the example of the clock. Is that still a good example of kind of what's going on? Is, the clock is ticking and telomerase kind of backs it back up a little bit, or?
Telomere shortening is a ticking clock that we have inside of our cells.
Yeah.
And it is actually limiting our lifespan. I mean, there's other things going on that I said before, is to control aging, but nothing is ever going to work to prevent our aging or slow down our aging.
Yeah.
Unless we also figure out a way to stop this telomere clock ticking. Okay, because when the telomeres get down to 5,000 bases, we're dead. Okay, and there's no, so what if you come up with anti-senolytics or antioxidants or anti-inflammatories and things like that? It's not going to do you any good if your telomeres are still getting down to 5,000 bases. So that's a key thing that we have to solve. And then after we solve that, maybe, so right now, when we do the math on the telomeres, it's impossible for a human to live beyond 125 years.
Okay.
And that's only if you have perfect genetics and perfect lifestyle can you even come close to 125 years.
Which is why we don't usually hear of somebody living to 125.
Yeah, and well, there's people now, there's at least two people that live to be 120. One lived to be 122, but now there's a lot of reports that studies are indicating that her daughter actually took her place. And the original person, whose name I'm not going to mention because everybody will argue with me on it, the original person actually died, and there was some kind of like money that was coming in from an ex-marriage or something like that, and they didn't want to lose that money. So the daughter impersonated the mother, and she then died at supposedly 122 when she was probably only like 70 or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
But and I don't know about the other person, but yeah, but it's like even that she smoked every day, things like that. So she didn't have the perfect lifestyle.
Yeah.
But I think nobody has the perfect lifestyle. Nobody has the perfect genetics. And so that's why nobody's really come close to that 125 limit. But I believe we can get there. And solving the telomere shortening problem is the way to do that. And then, but you have to do everything else. You just can't, you have to lead a good lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned accelerated aging, and I've got a lot of people, that listen to this that are very interested in that aspect of it. So accelerated aging are things that, while it might influence a lot of other metabolic issues in our body, it can speed up the shortening. Am I correct? It can speed
Yes.
up the shortening of the telomere. What are some of those things?
Well, free radicals, anything, radiation, free radicals, all those kind of things can actually damage telomeres and cause them to degrade, okay, to get
Okay.
shorter faster than they should. Okay, but inflammation is also another thing that can cause telomere shortening, because inflammation does it by causing the cells to divide more often than they normally would.
Oh, wow.
So as a result, that's probably one of the main things we got to worry about, is doing things that cause our cells to divide faster than they were originally meant to. So let me pick a few examples, like drinking alcohol. Okay, you drink alcohol, the alcohol kills your liver cells, but that's okay at the first, because other cells in your liver divide to replace those dead cells. But when they divide to replace those dead cells, the telomeres get shorter. Okay, and because you're killing off these cells, now the cell division to replace dead cells is going faster, therefore telomere shortening is going faster. When the telomeres get short, too short, like down to close to 5,000 bases, they can't divide anymore to replace those dead cells, and so you get liver cirrhosis. You get all these streaky things that look like accumulation of dead cells, because nothing's kicking those dead cells out of the way. And so, but that's a really good example. So you get liver cirrhosis, and if we could keep the telomeres from shortening, you could continue to drink forever and not have to worry about getting liver cirrhosis. I like that example because it's the simplest one that a lot of people understand, and since a lot of people like to drink it, and another example is microdermabrasion. Anything you do to your skin to like acid treatments or laser treatments that actually kill cells in your skin, that induces other cells to divide to replace those cells.
Yeah.
And that always makes you look younger. Okay. But it's actually, you're getting older. Okay.
That's always been one of my thoughts, because I'm as a holistic practitioner, one of my big things, especially a woman in her 50s, all of my friends, my markets, my clients, skin aging is a major component. And when I look at the things with skin aging, it's like, well, if I can get somebody to start taking really good care of their skin, their whole body's going to be taken care of. So, but that was always one of my thoughts, is if we're doing, like you said, microdermabrasion or heavy retinol treatments or chemical peels, and we're causing the quickening of the cellular turnover, are we going to end up with accelerated aging earlier?
Yeah, exactly. That's a lot of times when you see old movie actresses, and they look like prune faces.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
Okay. It's because they accelerated the aging in their skin from all the treatments they've done to stay looking young.
Oh no. Is there okay, so I've got to stop you right there.
I'm the cure. Telomeres will cure. Okay.
Okay, girls, we need to we need to start funding this research.
The same thing is true for immune boosters. Anything that boosts the immune system is going to cause rapid cell division. Any growth hormones, like human growth hormone, which I'm one of the inventors of, those are going to accelerate telomere shortening. So I always say, what's the point of living a long time if you're not living?
Yeah. So
I encourage people to continue to do the microdermabrasion and human growth hormones and immune boosters and drink alcohol, if it's your thing. And because I'm going to come through with this. I'm determined to figure out a way to lengthen telomeres, and I'll come in and save the day for all those people that really just wanted to enjoy living.
There you go. You just we need to get you that Superman cape, and instead of an S, we'll put a T on it. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about telomerase and what your company, Sierra Sciences, what you're doing, what kind of research you're doing right now to make these discoveries.
Well, the main thing that I want to do is I want to discover a design, a pill, a small molecule drug that can go in a pill that you can swallow. And it gets into your bloodstream and gets to all the cells of your body, induces the production of telomerase, and then enzyme that, I led the research and discovery at Geron Corporation in the early 1990s. It lengthens your telomeres, and if everything behaves exactly like human cells do in vitro and in a lot of studies with mice, we should see all of our tissues get young in every way imaginable. So, I think when we do that, we lengthen our telomeres, we'll see our DNA methylation patterns also change. We'll see our IgG glycosylation and glycosylation of other proteins change to become a younger characteristic. So I do believe there's a lot of markers of aging, but I think telomeres actually very likely control them all.
Yeah.
And so I lengthening telomeres, but so I think the best measure of aging is what I used to call the Betty White test. I wanted to see Betty White go from 95 to 25, walk out on stage and look, feel, behave 25 again. Okay, that's as far as I'm concerned, showing that your telomeres got longer, your DNA methylation patterns changed, or your IgG glycosylation changed. Doesn't mean you reversed aging unless you also passed what I call the Betty White test.
Yeah.
I'm now calling it the William Shatner test because William Shatner is up there in age too, and he's a young guy. But the problem with William Shatner is that he already looks 20 years younger, 30 years younger than he is. So it's like, but it's still somebody who people know. And boy, the most amazing thing in the world was him going up in the spacecraft up into.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah,
That's craziness. Yeah, no, so I was like reading a lot of your business plan. You have a lot of different ideas of how this can be, how it can be used, from skincare products to, I love the longevity sprinkle, and cancer treatments and detection, anti-aging therapies, health diagnostics. There's a lot of avenues that can be tapped into.
My main mission is to cure aging. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to be around when we discover life on other planets. Okay. That kind of thing.
Right.
I love living, I don't want living to be any less lovable because of aging.
Yeah.
But but it turns out there's a lot of other things we can do that kind of don't reach that threshold. And these are things that, could be very profitable, marketable products.
Yeah.
Now imagine, we already have, like, we've discovered small molecule chemicals and natural products that do induce production of telomerase in our cells, but not enough to actually reverse aging. Okay. Yeah. So but they're still useful because they theoretically should slow down aging.
Yeah.
Okay. And so
that's a good start. It's a good start until you figure it all out. We want to kind of slow it down so you have an extended time to figure this out.
But I personally don't want to spend my time focusing on those.
Yeah.
Because I want to get that cure for aging, because I want to be one of the people that benefit from all the research. But I am making all these other discoveries and ideas available to marketing partners. I already have a lot of people selling products, including skin products, like you mentioned, that contain telomerase inducers that will actually help slow down the aging of skin. And actually, there's a lot of age reversal that's seen too, because it turns out the really critically short telomeres need a lot less telomerase to re-lengthen them than the longer telomeres. And there's a whole story on that. If anybody ever wanted to learn more about all these things I'm saying, they can always go to my website, and there's a video, a 2-hour video called Everything About Telomeres. You don't have to listen to the whole video because it begins with a table of contents that tells you where to go. So you can listen to 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. Yeah. But it's but the skin products do actually there's been studies done, clinical studies actually looking at skin, depthness of wrinkles and things like that have shown that they actually do provide some age reversal, even though they don't produce enough telomerase to totally reverse aging. And this is because the shortest telomeres preferentially get longer with telomerase than the long telomeres.
Yeah.
But to
That makes
reverse
sense.
aging, we have to increase the long telomeres too.
Yeah.
So these products are available. People can Google them. I'm not going to mention product names here because somebody will get offended if I forget to name them.
Of course.
But there's a lot of companies out there right now that are selling things that we discovered here, not just for skin, but supplements too.
Yeah.
And so my research is funded by the royalties that we get from those companies.
Yeah.
But I have nothing to do with running those companies because I'm not a marketer. I'm a scientist.
Yeah.
I want to work at the lab bench and cure aging. But there's opportunities here. And now, so imagine a salt shaker that you sprinkle on your food or your dog's food that contains one of these chemicals. Okay, that's the longevity sprinkle that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean,
How easy is that?
that's a
Yeah.
gold mine if somebody decided to take it on and market it. Okay. I don't know why it's so difficult to get somebody to do that, but I'm not going to do it because I'm too busy with the research.
You're the science guy.
Yeah, I exactly. I'm the science guy, but it turns out you have to have a science guy also doing the marketing. So I've agreed with all the companies that are selling things right now that I will oftentimes speak to explain the science to audiences and stuff like that. But I'm not going to get around and try to market it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, so I do have a question. And we've talked a little bit about this, in the past, and I know that you've even addressed this some on some of your videos on your website. There is so much noise out there, and every product in the world, every product on the shelf says they have the cure for aging. So are there any tips that you can give our listener? Because not everybody has access to you to say, hey, Bill, is this true? Is there any tips of what to look for in ABC company, or not even the company, but in the pathways that they say they're using? Can we Google, should we be Googling PubMed, or should we be looking at YouTube videos made by podcasters like me? How do we find out the facts of what's real?
Well, okay, so there are some videos where I actually address that.
Okay.
One's called How to Know What's Real and Not Real.
Yeah.
It was a presentation I gave at an organization called People Unlimited, which is the most enthusiastic group in the world in terms of figuring out a way to extend lifespan. There's a few other videos where I address that too, but it's actually not easy because I can do it. Okay, I can, but you really have to have the ability to be good at statistical theory, logic, data analysis, things like that, to be able to read a study and know if it's legitimate or not.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's unintentionally not legitimate because the scientist didn't really have strong knowledge and backgrounds in statistics and data analysis and experimental design, but they still get their papers published.
Yeah.
So even in PubMed, you can always find support for anything you wish to be true. Okay. If you want to find a study that says smoking isn't bad for you, I guarantee you can find it in PubMed, even though PubMed is only peer-reviewed studies.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of papers slip through. And a lot of the companies that try to sell products that really they know don't work, okay, will try to get a peer-reviewed publication one way or another, and they succeed. And then they cite that paper as proof that they actually got it. But I mean, but I always say you have to do what's called, okay, meta-analysis is where you read a bunch of papers. And even you'll find some say one thing and some say the opposite thing. So you kind of count how many say one thing versus the other and go with the one that says the most.
That's my way.
But that's That's a lot of work, but it's to do it right, you have to do what's called critical meta-analysis,
Yeah.
peer-reviewed studies and non-peer-reviewed studies, to actually look at the data. Look, did they design their experiments right? Did they analyze their data? Did they do the statistics right? Are they making any false assumptions? Did they know even how to do the techniques? Okay, the research protocols. Now, I'm good at all that kind of stuff, so I can read a paper and I can write whole paragraphs on all the things that they've done wrong. But it's almost impossible to really know what's real and not real unless you really can get into that and find somebody who's good at these kind of things like I am. But there's okay. So thing is, a lot of the big products that are on the market are because the scientists are good marketers. But see, good scientists do not make good marketers, and good marketers do not make good scientists. Okay, the scientists that make good marketers end up usually being pretend scientists, and that's the ones you hear about all the time, all over the web, webinars, things like that. People promoting these products with scientific proof, saying it. Those are usually pretend scientists. Okay,
Yeah.
people that the only time they ever put a lab coat on is when the camera's on them. Okay? Now, my lab's right behind me. I've got 10,000 square feet of lab space here. That's what I want to do. I want to be in the lab coat there with my lab coat. I don't have my lab coat on now, which a lot of people would do
Yeah.
if they were being interviewed. But I put my lab coat on the second I go into the lab.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of stuff that got me so successful in all the things I've done before, including the discovery of telomerase and, as I said, human growth hormone, erythropoietin. I can't even remember them all. Tissue plasminogen activator. The discoveries I've made because I focus on just the science. I don't focus on what can I get published or what can how much money can I make if I put this together. I just want the world to be happier and healthier. Really.
Yeah, I love this quote that I found in your bio. And it is, my passion is to cure aging. My passion isn't to make sure that everyone knows that I'm the one who did it.
Yeah.
That's humbling. That's really your heart. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted you on the show, because it's you help to clear up a little bit of that confusion that is out there. A lot of us are very anxious for you to figure this whole telomerase thing out. Can you give us an inside look maybe to what your regimen is for things that we can do to help our health span as you're figuring out the longevity aspect of it?
Yeah, I think that's a real important discussion. I just want to make one comment first. And
Yeah.
the big bottleneck to the research to cure aging is actually not the science, it's the funding to do the science. And as I was mentioning, these pretend scientists or the scientists that do all the marketing, they're the ones that get most of the funding. And I feel terrible for the investors that invested in them because they've actually thrown their money away. Maybe they'll make a profit, but if they were passionate about curing aging, if that was their main passion, they invested in the wrong people. And that is, I see that time and time again.
Yeah.
That's the big obstacle. We gotta get investors to start investing in the right people. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not the only one. There's a list of people that I could give that I think really are genuinely interested in contributing to finding the cure for aging that really aren't into how much money can they make doing it.
Right.
Yeah. So when I cure aging, if I'm the one, I want to be obscure. Okay. I want to be off in my own place. I want people to always be bugging me with, oh, that's what you're the one that did it. I want to focus on, after I cure aging, I want to focus on curing other things.
Right.
Okay?
I was going to ask you what's after aging?
Well, we can still die from being run over by buses, okay, or trucks. And there is actually Elon Musk and Randall Kone and others are working on something called whole brain emulation, which is called also brain uploading.
Okay. Yeah.
And what this is that if you're suddenly in an accident, your airbag opens up, your brain is by Wi-Fi is uploaded to a computer. Okay. And then later your brain is downloaded to a clone that's made from some of your tissues that was recovered in the accident.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
And so you're back to you being that's one of the things I think is best. The other thing is cryogenics. I think that's the last resort, but it's like I'm very optimistic about someday. The problem isn't freezing people. The problem is thawing them out. Okay. And someday somebody's going to figure out how to thaw out a human
Yeah.
and not have all the cells be destroyed from ice crystals forming and things like
Yeah.
that. And that's
Yeah.
what's going to, but those are the other things that I'd like to be really active in. And then there's also all these genetic diseases, okay, that affect people that have nothing to do with aging, but they still die at young ages because of they have some genetic variation. I don't want to call it abnormality because we don't know. Maybe they were the normal ones and we're all the abnormal ones.
Yeah.
But it's a genetic variations that cause diseases. And you know, we hear a lot about gene editing. And I think that's the future, but you know, gene editing is not new. I was doing gene editing back in the early 2000s, in fact, late 1990s. Just a new technique has come along called CRISPR to do it.
Mhm.
But the problem isn't how to edit genes. We've known how to edit genes forever and ever. The problem is how to deliver the machinery to edit the genes to all the cells of the body.
Right.
And that's something that's always been an obstacle. Zinc fingers, I think, was the very first gene editing method. And there are actually companies that are doing that are still working on trying to find ways to deliver the genes. And I want to get involved in that because everybody has genetic differences. You know, if people get their DNA sequence or they get their what are called SNPs of their DNA from companies like 23andMe, and it tells you a lot about. Nobody's perfect. Okay, every one of us have things that we wish we didn't have, variations in our genes that they're called risk alleles. We want the non-risk alleles, not the risk alleles.
Right.
And but gene editing, we can edit that. And that's one of the things that I really want to do. And you'll see that in my business plans. Okay. Gene therapy is pretty much, we got to improve gene therapy to the point of where we can deliver it to all of our cells in a way that doesn't cause harm to our cells, which is one of the problems. So I want to get very involved in that after I cure aging.
Yeah.
Okay. Or after
You've
somebody.
got
I mean,
3 months and 17 days.
Might beat me to curing aging, and I hope he does because I want to benefit from it.
There you go.
So what were you saying?
I just said you've got 3 months and 17 days.
That's step one, just discovering the enzyme, getting it now produced in all of our cells.
Yeah.
That's taken me 20 years now, but
Yeah.
I think we could have done it by now if we had more funding. But
Right. That is the sticking point. That is absolutely the sticking point. And I hear, friends, colleagues, other peers that funding is always the issue. It's something that we have to cure funding to cure aging and many of these other issues that we're facing. And we're going to get into talking a little bit, just really briefly afterwards, about how people can find out more about Sarah Sciences. But to backtrack really fast.
Yeah. What do I take?
What do you do? What are you doing?
Well, I believe that the number one cause of aging is inflammation. Okay. And short telomeres cause inflammation, and also inflammation causes telomeres to get shorter. So it's a two-sorted kind of thing.
Yeah.
But solving the inflammation problem is probably one of the most important things we can do. Inflammation causes cardiovascular disease, it causes Alzheimer's, it causes diabetes, it causes everything. Okay. All the things that shorten our lifespan can almost all be attributed to inflammation. So I'm a vegan. Okay. I'm a vegan because plants don't have as many inflammatory components as meats, fish, fowl, and regular meat, and also dairy products. Okay. What's his name? Floyd. Forgetting his name. There's a really good book called Inflammation Nation. Okay.
Right.
It talks about arachidonic acid. Okay. Arachidonic acid is a omega-3 fatty acid. Maybe it might be an omega-6. I can't remember, but it's a fatty
Omega-9.
acid that actually is very inflammatory. It's not found in plants, but it's found in everything else. Okay.
Yeah.
All the meats and dairy products, even milk and cheese. So I avoid all that because I want to limit my arachidonic acid. But I do all kinds of other things to stay away from inflammatory components. And everybody's different. Some things cause inflammation in some people and not others. And so I take tests every year, like the ALCAT test, ALCAT, or the MRT test, MRT. Okay, there's companies that sell these things that test your blood, and then they test like hundreds and hundreds of different types of foods, and they can identify which food induce inflammatory responses. Okay.
Right.
And then they send me the list, and then I don't eat those foods. Okay. That's so I do that. So I'm hardcore. I want to be around when we have a cure for aging. I want to be around when we find life in outer space and things like that. When we figure out the origin of the universe and things like that. And so I've got to be making certain I'm doing everything I can now. But so reducing inflammation is very key. Okay.
Right.
But also reducing oxidative stress is also very key. Okay. Because oxidative stress is also a major cause of aging.
And how do we do that?
Well, lots of antioxidants. Okay.
Okay.
And I mean, my favorites are alpha lipoic acid, N-acetylcysteine. But N-acetylcysteine got some bad press lately because N-acetylcysteine forms glutathione when it gets inside your cells.
Yeah.
And that's making all the marketers of glutathione products having a hard time trying to sell their products when you can get, for a fraction of the cost, glutathione in your cells just by taking N-acetylcysteine, abbreviated NAC. So there's companies trying to shut them down, trying to make false claims that it's hazardous to your health, but it's not true. But so NAC, so alpha lipoic acid, NAC, vitamin E, vitamin D, they're also anti-inflammatories too. So you get a double advantage there. Omega-3 fatty acids are anti-inflammatories, at least some of them. And there's even some omega-6 fatty acids that are anti-inflammatory. But getting back to the antioxidants, what else? ECGC, I can't remember, the one in green tea.
The green tea one, I always get those letters mixed up
Yeah.
too. And I'm a nutritionist and I get them mixed up. ECGC, yeah.
But vitamin E and their analogs and things like that. Vitamin C, all those things are really good. So I take them all. But you don't want to take too much of an antioxidant because they become pro-oxidants. They actually, when you take too much, they actually increase your oxidative processes, so your oxidative stress.
Oh, wow.
You can overcome that by taking small amounts of a lot of different types of antioxidants.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, so there's I'm sure I'm leaving some off the list, but that's one of the things that we're very interested in finding somebody to market, because I have written down in places, all my supplements, and I know which antioxidants you want to take and which ones together. I just don't have them memorized off the top of my head, but I would love to put together some type of package where it contains all those to give to people.
Yeah.
The anti-inflammatories and antioxidants mostly. But one benefit of just decreasing oxidative stress and inflammation is also that decreases the rate of telomere shortening too. Okay, because both inflammation and oxidative stress, in addition to all the other bad things they do to you, cause accelerated telomere shortening.
Right.
So
what about stress? Does stress cause telomere shortening?
So that's the other thing I do. I meditate. Okay, I meditate a lot. I do a lot of yoga. I was actually the keynote speaker at a meditation and yoga conference in San Diego a few years ago.
Nice.
But I'm very big into that. I meditate 10 times a day. Okay.
Okay. Like short periods of time, or do you block out like hours on end, or how?
No, I don't make any rules or anything like that. I just say, okay, time to meditate. And I just meditate. Okay. And that's you know, as you know, I've talked about before, I've got this beautiful cabin out in the middle of nowhere. And when I need to meditate, that's one of the greatest places to go because there's no distractions. You know, people who meditate and always say how important it is, and they teach meditation, they'll often say you can meditate at any time, but I'm the first one that's going to say it's impossible to meditate when somebody's hammering the wall down next door to you or something like that.
Your
So
dog is barking.
you gotta find a quiet place to really get successful meditation.
Yeah.
But there's lots of data, and I showed this when I was that keynote speaker at that conference. Lots of data now showing that there's a lot of benefits to meditation, including people who meditate a lot have longer telomeres than people that don't. Okay, so reducing stress. You know, Dr. Elisa Epel, okay, EPEL. She is probably the top person I know. I consider her a good friend because I'm so in awe of her. But she's published books and stuff like that on how to reduce stress and other psychological problems and stuff like that that affect aging. And I'm going blank on the name of her main book that she published with a Nobel Prize winner, Elizabeth Blackburn.
We'll look it up.
Yeah. Okay. What is it? I can't remember the name of it. That's embarrassing. Okay, so it's a really, really great book. Okay, but so meditation, exercise. Okay, now this is another double-edged sword. Okay, things like that. If you don't exercise consistently, if you're one of these people that run every 2 weeks, and you know every 6 months run a marathon and do really well, but you're on your hands and knees throwing up, and you can't run again for days because you're so beaten up.
Yeah.
You're actually increasing your inflammation and oxidative stress, and so that's not good for you. Okay, but if you exercise all the time, you can find that your inflammatory markers, which TNF alpha, CRP, all these things don't increase. You actually do not increase inflammation. You actually decrease inflammation by exercising all the time.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you got to keep it fun. Okay. Go enter a 10K race, but don't kill yourself doing it.
Right.
Have fun doing it. When it quits being fun, quit. Okay. Yeah. That's what I always say. There's nothing wrong with dropping out of a race because the race stopped being fun. But so that's I can talk for an hour. I've spoken at running groups and other exercise groups about the importance of fun exercise as opposed to the really rigorous exercise. I always say, combine exercise with adventure. Okay, so I say go out and you got your mountains right in front of you. You've never been up there. You have no idea what's up there. Why get on an airplane or a boat and go visit Hawaii when you can explore your own backyard and there's so much there? You'd be amazed. So I'm all the time just going off for long runs, carrying food and water with me, and pumps that in case I run out of water, I can pump water from a stream and drink that. But I find that combining the adventure, you end up developing a disorder that I call can't turn around disorder. Okay. I swear to God, it's real.
It is real. I've experienced that.
I start running a trail, and this trail, I've never been on it before, but I'm dying to know what's around the next turn or over the next hill. And I say, I'm going to just go run for 5 miles. But 10 miles later, I haven't even turned around yet because I can't turn around. Okay. And so, but that's a good disorder to have.
We experience that hiking. Yeah. All the time.
And so I encourage, but that's a good way. Another thing is when I speak to running groups, and a lot of people in the audience are people that aren't runners. They're people who are trying to get into running. And I say, go out there, and if you see a coyote, run after it, follow it. Where does it go? Even if you're not on trail, off trail running is the most exciting thing in the world. As you know, I broke my arm about 2 months ago from trail running. You're always jumping over trees and things like that, fallen trees. And I had a bad crash and broke my arm, but it's fixed now and I'm back to doing it again. But it's like that's a great way to exercise. And that kind of exercise actually decreases your rate of telomere shortening,
Yeah.
decreases your oxidative stress, decreases your inflammation, and increases, and it's moving meditation is what
Yeah.
it really is.
It really is.
It's you, all your stress just totally disappears when you are out doing adventure, stuff like that.
It is.
Finding
I
people
think
to
it's
go
the
with you,
best.
that's the hard part.
Yeah.
That's the one that's why I run alone a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Now, speaking of running too, really fast, you are an ultra marathon runner, which means you run 100 miles.
100-mile races and longer, and anything longer than a marathon is considered an ultra marathon. But my favorite distance is 100 miles. And it's because it's a vacation. It's like, I can't wait to start. And I'll finish, I'll get close to, I'll be in races and people ask me how you're doing. I'll say, I hope it never ends,
Oh my
because
gosh.
I'm not killing myself. I
Yeah.
mean, I finished 100-mile races, jumping all excited, full of energy, wanting to tell all the stories of things I've seen and done and things like that during the race. You run all day and all night with a headlamp. You get very exciting experiences. I mean, some of them, I've run into mountain lions in the middle of 3 o'clock in the morning. My headlights shining on them and their eyeballs are reflecting back. And I've always found they're just as scared of me as I have of them. And so I just move on. And as soon as I move on, they calm down.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the point of living a long time if you're not living?
Right.
It,
But
it,
now to the listeners, you didn't start out, you didn't just wake up one morning after never exercising or anything, say, I'm going to run 100 miles today. So you built up to that.
Actually, I've been a
Uh-oh.
runner my entire life. I was on the track teams and cross country teams in high school and college. In graduate school, I started running marathons on my own because graduate schools didn't really allow you didn't give you sports activities. But I always, I was always into adventure and endurance. I became an endurance horseback rider. And then one time I was competing in a race, 100-mile race on horseback. And I come across this runner. I couldn't resist and I had to stop. How could a runner be this far away from anywhere? And so it was a woman, I started talking to her and she said she was training for the Western States 100-mile race, which I had never heard of at the time. This is like in the early 1990s.
Okay.
And so all of a sudden I became obsessed with, I have to do 100-mile races. Well, I jumped, so the very next year I signed up for my first 50-mile race. And I had so much fun. When I finished that race, I was just jumping with joy. I signed up for another 50-mile race the very next weekend because I run every day. I'm right now approaching almost 1,000 consecutive days of running 2 miles or more. And it's an addiction. And that's only because of the pandemic, because I'm not running as many races, so I don't have to taper. And the only reason I ever take a day off was to taper for a race.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing that many races right now. But I ran the 50-mile race, signed up for another one the next weekend. And then by the end of that year, I found out that I'd run more 50-mile races than anybody in the world.
Oh, wow.
I completed 20 50-mile races that one year. So yeah, I did just jump into it. But then I said, okay, so now I got to do hundreds. Okay, so the very next year, I entered my first 100-mile race and was super excited about it. Had a great time doing it. I didn't get sick. I didn't get killed. I didn't overdo it or anything like that. I had fun the entire time. And then again, that year, I found out that I broke the world record for the most 100-mile races run in a year,
Oh
without even knowing there was a record. Okay, and I also I won awards like the Grand Slam of ultra running and the last great race on earth, which is awards very few people in the sport get. But I'm the first person in the world to ever get it the very first year they ran hundreds.
Yeah.
Okay, and so yeah, a lot of people build up to it, but I was just too addicted to the idea. And so
Yeah. And you and your wife are featured.
we met in races and stuff like that.
Uh-huh. And y'all are featured in a documentary called The High.
Yes. We're both nuts. Okay. So she one time, so there's a race called Badwater. okay, which is a race through Death Valley in the middle of summer. Temperatures get up to 100 degrees, 130 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Uh, we both, I did it because I was just addicted to the idea. I had to do it. It's 135 miles. It starts from the lowest point of the United States, which is Badwater, a place called
Right.
Badwater, Death Valley, and it ends at the highest point in the United States called Mount Whitney, or
Uh-huh.
at least continental United States. And so I did that race, and my future wife at the time was crewing for me at the time, but she wanted to do it. So she and I both did it the next year. And then this guy from India contacts her and says, you know, I'm so impressed that you did that race. Would you like to come and run a race that I'm putting together in the Himalayas? They call it the Himalayas, not the
Yeah.
Himalayas. In the Himalayas, it's a race that's going to go over an 18,000 foot peak. And my wife said, yeah, I want to do it. And then she told me about it. I said, yeah, I want to do it too. And then it turns out we talked to the race director. The race director couldn't find anybody else that wanted to do it. We were the only two that wanted to do it. And
Only too crazy enough to do it.
they found one other person, a guy from England named Mark Cobain. And so then the race director, his name is Rajet Kahan, he ended up making it harder by having it go over two 18,000 foot peaks, made it 138 miles long, nonstop. The lowest elevation was for a short period of time at 11,000 feet. Okay. And my wife and I and Mark were the very first people to do it. And it's in this documentary called The High.
Mhm.
We both ran into problems, which I ended up having a gallbladder attack at about 50 miles and had to go to the hospital. And so I didn't finish the race. Molly, my wife Molly got her crew got lost her. They couldn't find her. And so she ran out of water and got very dehydrated, and she had to be taken to the hospital. And then a guy in the hospital bed next to her died from altitude sickness, which was not too motivating. But when she learned from the race director that I was in the hospital, she withdrew from the race. And so Mark Cobain was the only one that finished. So
Oh my
he made the reality of this real, okay, because everybody said it was impossible to do a race like that. So, but Molly went back and did it, finished. I went back and did it, and I finished. Molly and I actually got married at 18,000 feet elevation.
That is so awesome.
In the Himalayas. But there's the documentary, watch it, it's called
The High.
The High.
And we'll have a link to that in the show notes, but it's on YouTube. And then you're in another documentary called The Immortalist with Aubrey de Grey.
Yes.
And that's fascinating. We'll also have that in the show notes. And I believe there's another new one coming out, is there not?
Longevity Hackers is coming out. There's a few documentaries that I've been in. There's the first one I was in was called Immortal, which sounds a lot like the name of The Immortalist, but they're two different documentaries.
Okay.
And The Immortalist, Immortal actually won an Emmy. Okay. The Immortalist almost got an Oscar, okay, for Best New Documentary.
Nice.
But they're actually very entertaining. Okay. And Aubrey and I had a lot of fun doing that documentary. And of course, my wife's in them too, but because my wife is, I don't want to mention her age, but she looks 20 years younger than she is. And she's super athletic and super healthy. And I think she's the model example of everybody wants to be at her age.
She and I will become besties. I will figure out all of her secrets.
She's far more famous than I am in the ultramarathon world. Okay. And now her daughter has completed the Western States 100. By the way, I mentioned that I wanted to, I finished the Western States 100. Molly's daughter, so my stepdaughter, has done it now too.
Nice.
But the whole family has become ultra marathoners.
That is awesome. I don't think I'm going to be joining you on the ultra marathon running race, but we are, my husband and I are getting into high altitude hiking and climbing, and Mount Whitney is on our list. We've got a little ways to go to work up to that, but Mount Whitney
I
is
did
on
it
our
twice
list.
in one day.
I
And,
know.
yeah.
I know. I have to work on my acclimatization because I did get a little altitude sick at 10.5. So I
Alto
want
Labs. There's a thing, Google Alto, ALTOLAB. They sell a device that will make it so you can go to the top of Mount Everest, okay, without having any altitude problems. Okay, and that's so when I first, and every time I've gone to the Himalayas to run up there, I've used this device for like 3 months in advance.
to.
And it just works beautifully. A lot of other runners, especially a guy named Ray Sanchez, has used it too, and has done really well. But I proved to myself that it really made a difference, because when I first flew to India, and it was practically at sea level, and then it was in Delhi, and then got in an airplane and flew up to 11,000 feet at a town called Leh, L-E-H. The first thing I did was get into a taxi cab and have them drive up to the highest motorable pass in the world, which is called Kardum Law. It was 18,500 feet elevation. They drove me up immediately there, and I got out and I ran uphill. Okay, well, having any problems at all. When everywhere I looked, I saw people lying on the ground,
Yes.
being altitude sickness. So this thing really works. Alto Labs is the best thing in the world for training for high altitudes.
Okay. I will look that up. I'll put a link on the show notes to you guys for that, because I'm sure I'm not the only one. Um, Bill, is there anything else that you would like to share with us on your regimen, on health span, on future research?
I mean, I do take a lot of supplements, okay, and
Me too.
I used to give talks and talk all about the supplements I take and why I take each one and stuff like that. And then Dr. Sandra Kaufman
Mhm.
published a book called The Kaufman Protocol. And I read that book and I thought, that's the most brilliant book. Yeah, right there. Okay, so now instead of telling everybody about all the supplements I take, I just say I follow everything that the Kaufman Protocol says.
Yeah.
And she's come out with another book too now, that even goes into more detail. But it's not just it's formulas. I mean, it's like you have these like ways of deciding which supplements you should take. She tells you exactly how to do this. She gives you scoring systems and stuff like that. It's all, and she understands it all immensely well. Okay, and that's what really sold me when I read the book. And so now my supplement regimen is what Sandra Kaufman says. Okay, and I do take a few other prescription drugs because of everybody has genetic variations that
Of course.
make us different. So, but otherwise, the supplements, and I take a lot of supplements, and every time Sandra Kaufman comes up with something new and lets me know, I add that to my list. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I have two drawer fulls of supplements that I like bounce between all the time. My husband just laughs at me half the time. But yeah, it's imperative, because I mean, while we are not able to, cure aging quite yet, we can slow it down. And the hopes of having a longer health span, staying healthier longer, and enjoying the life that we're living.
that's the absolute most important thing that people should be doing now.
Yeah.
Okay, doing whatever they can to slow down their aging. And I mean, don't smoke. It's like, that's one of the, all smokers that have smoked in their lives look older than their friends their same age that don't smoke. But there's so many things that people do that accelerate their aging. And a lot of times they think, well, why not? Because I'm not going to live forever. Well, start thinking to yourself, you might just live forever. Okay. That's what I believe. I don't know if forever is a real word, but I'm going to live as long as I can. That's for sure.
Right.
And I'm going to enjoy every moment of it because I love living.
Yeah.
Living's an adventure,
Yeah.
and I love adventure.
That's absolutely, absolutely. Now, Sarah Sciences is your company. And we'll be having a link to that on our show notes as well. But the website is SISCI.com. So
It's
Sierra,
short for Sierra Sciences, and Sierra is like named after the Sierra Mountains.
right.
So Sierra, because I'm looking right at the Sierra Mountains right now when I look out my front window.
Nice.
It's sierrasci.com. And in there, there's a lot of videos. There's documents like talking about my background and my history, and it's like there's a lot of information there. I just don't want people to be disappointed because I don't specialize in having the most sexy website in the world. I just
You are a scientist.
very informative website.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, if somebody is watching this, a company is watching this, and they're interested in learning more about getting involved in an investment kind of way, they can look at your websites, they can contact you on your website.
I have my cell phone number on the top corner of my
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I do want to hear from such people. But you know what? I also want ambassadors.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm not a marketer. I need people to be going out to spread the word, to approach investors. I pay finder's fees, and a lot of people are collecting finder's fees right now from me, from bringing me go-to-market partners or investors and things like that. But that's what I need. I need people, ambassadors, to be working with me. They will benefit tremendously from it. But as I said, good scientists don't make good marketers. And I get excited when I speak on stage because I love educating audiences, but I tend to always forget my main goal is I got to find funding to get the research done. And ambassadors can help. And I do have a lot of ambassadors, but I need a lot more.
Well, there you go. And we have a lot of influencers that listen to this show. Of course, I will be a wonderful ambassador, willing ambassador for you as well. Bill, thank you so much for being on the show today, for sharing your insight, your wisdom, a glimpse into where aging is heading, all of your research on telomerase. We're excited to watch as you discover the cure for aging. And if y'all have any questions about the show, head over to Instagram at Becoming Ageless Podcast, drop your questions under this show's podcast. And if you want to catch up with me, you can find me all over social media at Robin Lynn, everywhere, ROBYNNLIN. And I share my own tips for living agelessly, as well as decreasing bioage and increasing health span. And of course, our show website is becomingagelesspodcast.com, where you can catch up with past episodes. And I encourage you to subscribe to stay in the know. Please consider sharing with your friends. And of course, as I mentioned, all links that we talked about will be in the show notes. So you guys, thank you. Thank you, Bill, for being with us today. And I hope you'll join me here next time on Becoming Ageless as we uncover new tips, tricks, science, actions to increase your whole health span. Thank you, guys. Bill, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Robin. I had fun.
Me
All right.
too.